Let's go to this now. As South Africa continues its battle against corruption, concerns about the safety of whistleblowers continue. For example, the 2022 Corruption Perception Index shows that the country is stagnating in its fight against corruption. Now, these stories are often brought to the fore by whistleblowers who do this at huge personal costs. Advocate Paul Hoffman argues that an ombud for whistleblowers is now needed. And he is the director at Accountability Now and joins us live now. That's Advocate Hoffman, of course. Thank you so much, Advocate, for your time. Let's start with why you believe this ombud is needed.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I think that there's a need to change the culture in South Africa as far as our interface with whistleblowers is concerned. You know, in the old South Africa, whistleblowers were regarded as impimpis and they came to sticky ends. In the new South Africa, whistleblowers are in fact heroes of the people who prevent or report the theft of public money by those involved in grand corruption, in kleptocracy, and in the ongoing processes of state capture. So our whistleblowers need to be better protected than they are at the moment, and we should all welcome the fact that whistleblowing still continues in South Africa, because if it doesn't, there will be nothing left to steal quite soon.
And one of the things that you write about, you say that instead of them being honored, whistleblowers find themselves reviled, impoverished, unemployed, ill and isolated. And this, of course, is something that we've seen through various forms, and speaking to some of them, talking about this huge personal cost that, whistleblowing has come at. So when maybe one is watching tonight, they're wondering, how does an ombud ensure that they are protected and they are not treated as you've written here in your article?
Well, the ombud inserts himself or herself into the process of whistleblowing by giving the whistleblower the opportunity of speaking to a properly qualified intermediary. The ombud's role is to protect the whistleblower against identification until such time as that whistleblower can be afforded the protection of the state if it turns out, apropos of the ombud's investigation of the whistleblower's information, that there is indeed a big fire behind the smoke to which the whistleblower points.
And Advocate Hoffman, one of the things that we've seen over time is the concern around the protection of whistleblowers. And in my mind right now, I've got Babita Deokaran, for example. And you think about the legislation that a lot of people have been talking about, that we need to make sure that there are certain, screws that need to be tightened there. There's a petition that has also been signed in this particular regard to ensure that they're protected. Why are things so slow? Is it a lack of political will, or is there something else at play here?
I think that it is, at least in part, a lack of political will, but we also need to understand that the legislative reform process is a time-consuming matter. We require public participation if we change legislation. The beauty of creating an ombud office is that you don't need to create any legislative framework for it. You simply ask retired judges who are very well qualified for the job of ombud to volunteer to become the ombud for a particular seat of the High Court, and then the whistleblowers know that there is a friendly face that they can phone, email, or even visit with a view to having their complaint or the information looked at, and with a view to having their identity protected through the mechanisms of an ombud intermediary for them.
And should then, when you look at that, should the ombud then continue, maybe potentially in the future, when we get to that point where legislation is now there, past everything, all the boxes are ticked there, should it, an ombud still continue, or then be phased out when that particular, part of the battle has then been won?
Yes, that will depend on how the law is amended. And by the time Parliament is ready to vote on the amendments to the law, we should know, provided the Ombuds Office is set up soon, how the Ombuds Office is working and whether it should be incorporated in the improved regime, or whether the improved regime is such that whistleblowers will be protected from the get-go and will not face the fate that many of them have at the moment.
And just, when we're then looking at the issue of whistleblowing, let's look at, what risk we are facing as South Africa if it continues that whistleblowers are not being, protected, particularly in the fight against corruption.
Yes, if whistleblowers continue to be discouraged by the various obstacles that are put in their way, some of them get killed because they put their hand up. Some of them get fired because they put their hand up. Some of them get discriminated against or moved sideways or posted to some faraway position that they had never intended to have in the first place. All sorts of tricks are used to discourage whistleblowers, and some of them have fatal consequences. If the identity of the whistleblower is not known to the employer or to the person against whom the whistle is being blown, then a lot of those strategies that are used to discourage whistleblowers just cannot be used anymore, because the Ombud is there from day one of the process, protecting the interests of the whistleblower. And those interests are worthy of protection.
Yeah, and Advocate Hoffman, I hope you can indulge me on this one. When we look at there's been so many developing stories today and even through, the course of the previous couple of days. Let's look at this issue around Thabo Bester. The team is now in Tanzania, and of course, hopeful that the processes will wrap up quickly and be able to bring, the three back home. How hopeful are you that this could be a quick process and really looking at what has unfolded so far around this particular escape?
Yes, I think that the prospects of getting Thabo Bester back behind bars quite soon are infinitely better than the prospects of getting the Guptas arrested again, let alone brought back to South Africa to face trial. Remember, Thabo Bester is a convicted criminal who has a long sentence, which he has only served a small part of. So the process of getting him back into prison with the cooperation of the friendly authorities in Tanzania should not take long at all.
Advocate Hoffman, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Do appreciate it. That is Accountability and now Director Advocate Paul Hoffman.